He got home earlier than anyone expected. But as he stepped inside, he heard voices. Small voices, laughing, talking, and he froze. His boys hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. So who was he hearing? James Newman didn't tell anyone he was coming back that day. He wasn't expecting anything, just another quiet afternoon in a quiet house. That's all it had been since Elise passed. 2 years of silence. The boys had stopped talking. The laughter disappeared. He tried everything. Specialists, therapists, 4 different nannies. Nothing reached them. So when he heard voices coming from the living room, he thought maybe the staff left the TV on. But the closer he walked, the more it sounded real. His sons, speaking, laughing, and a woman's voice too. Not loud, not instructing, just present. He opened the door slowly, and what he saw, he couldn't explain. Not with logic, not with science. Just 2 little boys, alive again. And one maid, sitting on the floor, like she was meant to be there all along. If you've ever believed that God can still heal what feels too far gone, stay with this story. Like this video, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Because sometimes, God sends the right person into your life, not to fix everything, but to remind you, He never left. The door clicked shut behind him, soft but final. James stood in the foyer, still holding his keys, briefcase hanging loose from his shoulder. No one had seen him arrive. He liked it that way. Coming home had never felt like coming home, not in a long time. Not since Elise's funeral, not since the twins stopped speaking, not since the house became more of a museum than a memory. He slipped off his coat, expecting to be greeted by silence, maybe the hum of the heater or the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Instead, he heard something else, muffled, faint at first, then unmistakable. Laughter, then words, small voices overlapping, fast, full of energy. James froze mid-step. He strained to listen. Cups full. Make more slime. A woman's voice followed, gentle, southern, low. Now hold still. I don't want to get it on your socks again. He blinked, confused. The twins didn't talk. They hadn't, not really in almost 2 years. Not even with him. He moved quietly through the hallway, his shoes brushing over polished floors, careful not to make a sound. The voices grew louder, happier. He stopped outside the living room door, heart pounding now for reasons he didn't understand. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was something else. He pushed the door open slowly, and there, right in the middle of his sleek, spotless living room, was a scene that didn't belong. The coffee table had been pushed aside. A blanket had been draped over 2 chairs like a tent. The cream-colored rug was covered in newspaper, and on top of that, a bucket of green slime. His sons Evan and Ryan sat cross-legged on the floor in old pajamas, hands sticky, faces lit up with joy. Laughing, talking, smiling, alive. And beside them, pouring a gooey mixture into metal cups with a wooden spoon, was Gloria the maid. Her yellow gloves were stained, apron tied loose around her waist, curls falling from her bun. She didn't notice James right away. She was too focused, carefully holding the cup steady while Ryan tried to stir it with a plastic spoon. Then Evan looked up. His eyes locked with James's. "Daddy," he beamed. "Gloria made dinosaur juice." Ryan held up his cup proudly, green slime dripping down the side. "Wanna try?" he asked. James couldn't move. He couldn't speak. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. His heart thudded in his chest, loud, uneven. It was the first time either of them had said his name, in nearly a year. Gloria turned then. Her eyes met his. For a second, no one said anything. The room felt thick, like time had folded over itself. James had walked in expecting silence, maybe a mess to scold. Instead, he'd walked into a miracle. "I was just letting them mix things," Gloria said softly, rising to her feet. James looked at her, really looked. She wasn't hired to do this. She had no background in child development, no clipboard, no game plan. She was just here, on the floor, with his children. And somehow, they were speaking to her. Not to him. "I thought he started, but his voice cracked. "I know," Gloria said gently. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. Evan tugged at her apron. "Can we keep making it, Gloria? Please?" She smiled down at him. "Of course, sugar." James stood still in the doorway, one hand resting against the frame, the other clutching the strap of his bag like it might anchor him to the ground. He had spent 2 years trying to control the silence, and here it was, breaking wide open, without a schedule, without a strategy, just a woman kneeling on the floor and listening. The laughter faded behind him, but it didn't leave. James walked down the hall like a man retracing steps in a dream, each footfall softer than the last. He ended up in the kitchen without meaning to. The marble countertops gleamed. The stainless steel appliances reflected back a version of his life that always looked neat from the outside. Clean, orderly, controlled. He leaned against the edge of the counter, staring at nothing. They had spoken. His boys. Full sentences. With joy. He had stood there, 10 feet away, and watched them light up like it was just any other Thursday. But it wasn't, and nothing would ever be again. He closed his eyes for a second. Images flashed. Elise in this same kitchen, barefoot, dancing with Evan in one arm and Ryan squealing from a high chair. That was before. Before the hospital. Before the quiet swallowed everything. Back then, the house had a heartbeat. Now, every room echoed with the silence he'd built like armor. After Elise died, James didn't cry. Not publicly, not privately. Instead, he did what he knew. He scheduled. He managed. He built the house tighter, cleaner, quieter. He replaced love with routine. Replaced presence with professionals. Replaced listening with silence. And the twins, only 2 years old at the time, simply stopped talking. The doctors called it selective mutism. James called it punishment. Not theirs. His. The first nanny had credentials. She left after 3 weeks, said the boys were unreachable. The second tried harder, brought flashcards, reward charts, labeled every toy in the house. They didn't respond. The third came with an emotional development program. She lasted 2 months. By the time the fourth arrived, the boys barely looked up when strangers entered the room. James started to believe the silence might last forever. Until Gloria. She wasn't sent as a nanny, just housekeeping. Agency paperwork, temporary fill-in. He hadn't even met her properly. He barely remembered her name the first week. But the boys did. He began to notice little things. A hum of a song coming from the hallway, a light on in their room before sunrise, handwritten notes on the fridge. Evan asked for toast this morning, smiled too. She didn't demand their attention. She gave them space. She didn't correct them. She waited. She didn't fix anything. She simply stayed. James stood at the kitchen sink now, staring at the clean dishes stacked beside it. How had she reached them? What had she done that no one else could? He didn't understand it. And part of him didn't want to, because with every word the twins spoke to her, something inside him cracked. They had given their voices to someone else, and yet he couldn't bring himself to stop it. "Mr. Newman?" Her voice came from behind him, quiet, careful. He turned around. Gloria stood in the doorway, gloves off, eyes soft. "I didn't know you were home." He said nothing. For a moment, it was just the two of them in that spotless kitchen, with the sound of giggling still faint behind her. "I wasn't trying to overstep," she added gently. "They just wanted to play. I didn't think they'd start talking, but when they did, I didn't want to stop it either." He looked at her, really looked at her. No polish, no posture, just calm. Gloria wasn't afraid of him, not in the way the staff usually was. And she didn't apologize like someone who thought she did something wrong. She just stood there, steady. James cleared his throat. "They said your name." Gloria nodded. "They said mine too." He wanted to be angry. But what rose inside him wasn't rage. It was grief. And something underneath it. Something warm, unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. But he wasn't ready to name it. Not yet. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. James had cancelled a meeting last minute, an investor lunch in the city he hadn't wanted to attend anyway, and found himself with an hour to spare and nowhere to be. So he drove home. Quiet roads, quiet thoughts. No one was expecting him. When he arrived, the house looked the same as always. But inside, it didn't feel the same. Now he stood outside the boy's bedroom door, hand resting on the knob. From the other side, there was noise again. Gentle, alive. "Mix it, mix it, mix it." Ryan's voice light and high, followed by laughter. Then Gloria's voice. "All right now, let's stir slow, or it's going to fly up and hit the ceiling like last time." James opened the door slowly. The bedroom floor was covered in towels and plastic sheets. There was food coloring on the dresser. A large bowl sat in the middle of the room, bubbling with something thick and green. Gloria was on her knees, hands messy, smile soft. The boys were crouched on either side of her, stirring with wooden spoons. The room smelled faintly of lemon and soap, and joy. Evan looked up first. "Daddy," he said again, with less surprise this time, just certainty. James said nothing. He stepped inside and stood near the wall, unsure of where to place himself in a room that clearly didn't need him. Ryan was the first to speak this time. "Gloria says it's dinosaur juice." He held up his spoon, slime dripping onto the floor. Evan laughed. "She said if we drink it, we'll grow spikes." Gloria looked over her shoulder at James, slightly nervous now. "I was just letting them play, sir. Nothing fancy. They picked the ingredients." James didn't respond. He watched. The boys weren't just playing. They were present, awake, talking, laughing, and not once had they looked to him. He felt it then. Not rejection. Something deeper. Absence. They had built a little world without him. And for the first time, it wasn't quiet. It was full. He cleared his throat, trying to hold something inside that didn't want to stay in. "Why slime?" he asked finally, more to ask something than for an answer. Gloria shrugged gently. "They picked it, said they wanted to make something messy." James nodded slowly. He didn't know what to say next. Then Evan did something he hadn't done in over a year. He reached for Gloria's arm and leaned his head on it. "I love you, Gloria," he said softly. No prompt, no encouragement. Just truth, just timing, just him. Gloria didn't move. She placed her hand on his back, slow and careful. "I love you too, baby," she whispered. James felt it in his chest, not like a blow, but like a door opening into a room he didn't remember building. Evan didn't even glance at him. Ryan looked up, eyes wide, watching his father. James couldn't speak, couldn't move. The silence came rushing back, not from the room, but from inside him. He'd waited so long to hear his son speak again, and now that they had, it wasn't to him. Later that night, James sat alone in his study, lights dim, computer open but untouched. He hadn't said a word to Gloria since the bedroom. The boys had fallen asleep quickly, exhausted from too much laughter, too much mess, too much life. And James, he still hadn't figured out what he felt. Something between shame and surrender, between awe, and something that almost felt like grace. He closed the laptop. The cursor blinked against an empty screen. He didn't need to write anything down tonight. He just needed to listen. The photo surfaced 2 days later. James wasn't tagged. The post had no caption. Just a low-quality shot taken from outside the estate's back gate, zoomed in too far, shaky. But the image was clear enough. Gloria, kneeling in the grass, holding Ryan against her hip. Evan standing next to her, slime cup in hand. The boys were grinning. Gloria's head was tilted back in a laugh. It would have been forgettable to anyone else. But not in James Newman's world. By noon, his phone was buzzing with calls. By 3, the PR team was already in the boardroom. He sat through the meeting in silence, jaw clenched, one leg crossed over the other. "This needs reframing," one of them said. "Quickly. She's untrained. She's not even hired for childcare. What happens if this story leaks further?" The room buzzed with polished panic. James looked out the window. Beyond the glass, the backyard sat in late afternoon stillness. Somewhere out there, The twins were probably chasing each other barefoot. Gloria would be with them, probably wiping noses, or pouring more dinosaur juice, or kneeling beside them, like she belonged there. The voices in the room grew louder. "James, we suggest immediate quiet removal. We'll reassign her, with a full compensation package. Keep it professional, clean, silent." He turned away from the window. "You think this is a problem?" he asked. One of the younger advisors nodded too quickly. "It's not aligned with the brand. You're a public figure." James didn't respond. He just stood. The room fell silent. He left without another word. That night, he walked the halls of his own home like a stranger. It was past bedtime. The house had settled into its usual stillness. Except one room. The twins' bedroom door was cracked open. He paused. Inside, Gloria sat cross-legged on the rug between the two beds, whispering something he couldn't hear. A soft hum followed, slow, steady, almost like a lullaby. Not sung, just breathed. The boys were half asleep. One curled toward her voice. The other, clutching a stuffed dinosaur under his chin. James didn't step inside. He just watched from the shadows, chest tight with a question he hadn't dared say aloud. Why not me? Why didn't they run to him like that? Why didn't they speak when he was near? Why did their peace live in someone else's voice? He thought about Elise, about the way she used to say, "Don't just show up, sit down, that's where they'll find you." He never really understood what she meant until now. Later that night, Gloria stood at the sink folding towels. James stepped into the kitchen quietly. She didn't look up, but she knew he was there. "They settled easy tonight," she said. "They were tired." He nodded once. "I saw." There was a long silence. It stretched out between them like a question too big for either of them to hold. Finally, James asked it not in anger, but in quiet ache. "Do they see you as their mother?" Gloria didn't flinch. She placed the towel down, folded perfectly, and turned to face him. "No," she said softly, "but they do see me." That answer hit harder than anything else could have. He swallowed. Something in him wanted to push back, explain, defend, say I was here all along. But he didn't. Because deep down, he knew being present in a house isn't the same as being present in a heart. He looked at her for a long moment. "What are you doing to them?" he asked, not accusing, just lost. Gloria's voice was calm, low, sure. "I'm just making room, that's all." "Room for what?" "To be little again." James didn't respond. Because the truth was, he didn't know how to make room for anything. Not yet. The house had gone quiet again. Not the old kind of silence, the heavy, suffocating stillness that followed them around after Elise died. This silence felt softer, like something had exhaled. James stood at the bottom of the stairs, one hand resting on the banister, listening. No crying, no shouting, no toys being thrown in frustration. Just a faint hum from the hallway, Gloria, maybe folding laundry, maybe singing to herself again. He stayed there longer than he needed to, as if crossing that final step meant stepping into something he couldn't unsee. When he finally walked into the kitchen, he saw it, taped to the fridge. A photo, worn and slightly bent at the corner, like it had already been handled by small hands. Gloria, standing between Evan and Ryan, all three of them barefoot on the living room rug. Evan held the tin cup of green slime. Ryan's arm was wrapped around Gloria's leg. All three of them were smiling, really smiling, the kind that can't be posed. Someone had written in marker across the bottom, "Our family." James froze. He stared at it for a long time. The fridge light buzzed above him. The hum of the dishwasher filled the silence. He didn't touch the photo, didn't remove it, didn't say a word. He just stood there, trying to figure out where he fit in a picture he wasn't in. A while later, once the dishes had been done and the boys had fallen asleep, James found himself in the laundry room doorway. Gloria was sitting on a low stool, folding pajamas. The fabric was soft, worn at the cuffs. She didn't look up when he stepped in. She was humming something low and familiar, a hymn maybe. He couldn't place it. "You took that photo?" he asked quietly. She looked up, not startled, just present. "They asked me to," she said. "Ryan brought the old camera from the hallway drawer. Said they wanted a picture before bedtime. James nodded slowly. And you put it on the fridge? Gloria paused for just a second. They did. He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded across his chest. There was a long pause, the kind that doesn't rush to fill itself. They're getting attached to you, he said. Gloria folded the last pajama top carefully, set it on the stack, and met his eyes. I know. It wasn't pride in her voice. It wasn't apology either. Just honesty. James looked down at his shoes. I never wanted someone else to take Elise's place, he said, the words coming slower than usual. I thought, if I kept everything in order, if I followed the plan. He didn't finish the sentence. Gloria stood, wiping her hands gently on her apron. I'm not trying to take her place, Mr. Newman. She looked him in the eyes, gentle, steady. I'm just loving what's still here. James blinked. There was nothing defensive in her voice, nothing demanding, just truth, and maybe a little grace. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down again, his voice low. Evan told me they want to take another picture, with you. This time, they want to put it in their room. Gloria's face softened. That okay with you? James didn't answer right away. He thought of the photo on the fridge, the word family. He thought of Elise's laugh in the kitchen, of Evan's voice saying, Gloria made dinosaur juice, of Ryan hugging her leg. And finally, he looked up. I didn't know healing could look like that, he whispered. Gloria smiled, small and sure. Sometimes it does, she said. Sometimes it looks like mess, and glue, and green slime on the floor. That night, as James passed through the kitchen on his way to bed, he stopped in front of the fridge again. The photo was still there. He didn't take it down. But this time, he smiled. Just a little. James didn't call the therapist out of doubt. He called her out of something closer to fear. Not the loud kind, the kind that creeps in when something starts working and you don't know why. Dr. Lena Harper had worked with the boys after Elise passed. Soft-spoken, intuitive, the kind of woman who didn't come with charts, just warm eyes and an instinct for what wasn't being said. She hadn't been to the house in over a year. Now, she stood in the living room, hands in her coat pockets, watching as Gloria knelt beside Ryan and helped him sort through puzzle pieces. Lena didn't interrupt. She didn't ask questions. She just watched. James stood a few steps behind, arms folded, heart pacing. He expected her to take notes, ask for background, observe for a week and schedule a meeting. But she didn't. After 15 minutes, she sat down on the floor next to Gloria. Not above her. Not across from her. Right beside her. She picked up a stray piece of the puzzle and handed it to Ryan, who took it without hesitation and pointed to where it should go. Gloria smiled and whispered, "That's it, baby." Ryan leaned into her side, and Lena simply watched it happen. When the boys went down for their nap, James poured 2 mugs of coffee and met Lena at the dining table. He didn't ask her what she thought. He just handed her the mug and waited. She stirred it slowly, then looked up. "They don't need fixing, James." The words hit harder than he expected. He sat back slightly. "That's not what You brought me here to find out why they're opening up," she said gently. "You want to measure it, define it, put it in a frame." James looked down. "I just want to understand it." Lena nodded, then leaned in. They trust her, not because she made a plan, not because she came in with answers, but because she got on the floor. James didn't respond. He stared at the edge of the table, jaw tight. Lena continued, quieter now. "You've been in this house every day. But the question is, have you been in their world?" The silence between them stretched. James swallowed hard. "I've done everything," he said. "Every resource, every expert, every evaluation. I know," Lena interrupted softly, "but none of it mattered to them." James looked up sharply. She didn't back down. "They weren't waiting for a system, James," she said. "They were waiting for someone who would sit long enough for the words to land." He didn't speak for a while. Lena sipped her coffee again, eyes never leaving his face. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "What does that say about me?" It wasn't a defensive question. It wasn't angry. It was bare. Lena looked at him for a long time. Then, just above a whisper, "It says your grief made you unreachable." James looked away. His hand curled around the coffee mug like it was the only thing tethering him to the moment. The room felt small suddenly, like the walls had moved in closer. He found Gloria in the boys' room later that evening. She was folding tiny t-shirts, smoothing each one gently before stacking them on the shelf. James stood in the doorway, unsure how long she'd known he was there. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Gloria didn't turn. "Of course." He stepped in. "What does this say about me?" he asked again, barely above a whisper. Gloria paused, her hand resting on one of Ryan's shirts. Then she turned, looked at him gently, and said, "It says they were waiting. That's all." James stood there, breathing shallow, blinking slow. He didn't respond. Because deep down, he knew she was right. The house felt different now. Not louder, not busier, just fuller. Like the air had a warmth to it again, like something had opened and hadn't closed back up. James noticed it in the small things, the way Ryan hummed when he walked down the stairs, the way Evan left his bedroom door cracked open at night just enough for light to slip in. He hadn't asked for it. He didn't cause it. But it was happening, and that truth both comforted and unsettled him. He found himself lingering more. At doorways, in the hallway, beside the kitchen table, pretending to look at paperwork while watching Gloria tie shoelaces or peel apples. He started to see what he hadn't seen before. She wasn't trying to be their mother. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She just saw them. Every need, every pause, every unspoken sentence. And in return, they saw her too. It happened on a quiet afternoon. The rain tapped softly on the windows. Evan and Ryan were sprawled on the rug, building towers out of wooden blocks. Gloria sat nearby, legs tucked under her, gently sorting scattered crayons. James was on the couch, pretending to read. He heard it in the middle of their chatter, soft but clear. "Gloria, are you our mummy now?" The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. No one moved at first. Ryan's eyes stayed on the blocks. Evan looked up. Gloria didn't rush to answer. She set down the crayon in her hand, slowly, carefully. Then she looked at them, both of them, with steady warmth. "No, baby," she said, "but I'm someone who loves you, and I'm not going anywhere." There was no tension in her voice, no fear, just peace. Evan didn't seem disappointed. Ryan leaned over and rested his head on her arm. James sat frozen. He'd known it might come. The question. But knowing it and hearing it weren't the same. He should have felt jealousy. But what washed over him instead was sorrow. Not for what was being built, but for all the days he hadn't been part of it. That night, after the house had gone still, James stood at the foot of the twins' beds. They were already asleep. One of them snored softly. He looked at their faces, so small, so peaceful. And for the first time in a long while, he felt the ache of what he'd missed. Not the milestones, not the photos, but the moments. The quiet ones, the messy ones, the ones Gloria had shown up for. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake them. He ran a hand over Evan's blanket and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me to be." The boy stirred slightly, but didn't wake. James sat in that silence for a long time. A little later, he walked into the kitchen. Gloria was drying the dishes. He didn't speak right away. He just stood by the counter. Finally, he said softly, "They asked if you were their mother." Gloria nodded. "I heard." James looked down, then back at her. "I used to be afraid they'd forget Elise," he said. Gloria put the dish towel down. "I'm not here to take her place," she said. "I know," James replied, then added, almost to himself, "but I think you were sent here to help them remember what love still feels like." Gloria didn't answer, not with words, just a soft, tearful smile. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt holy. The study was quiet, not the kind of quiet that used to choke the house. This silence felt different, like something waiting, not something missing. James sat behind his desk, The soft creak of his chair the only sound. The lamp cast a warm glow across the papers in front of him. A blank envelope, a guardianship form, a brass key. He turned the key over in his hand slowly. It was old, but polished, heavy, engraved with 3 small letters, E, R, J. Evan, Ryan, James. He closed his eyes and let the weight of it settle. He hadn't planned to do this. He'd sat in this room 100 nights and told himself he could manage everything, alone. That order would protect them, that money would secure them, that silence would shield them. But it hadn't. What had saved his sons was not control. It was presence, consistency. Soft hands pouring slime into tin cups and folding laundry with quiet grace. It was Gloria. Earlier that afternoon, the storm rolled in just as the sun slipped behind the hills. The boys had pressed their faces to the window, wide-eyed, as the sky cracked open. The first thunderclap sent Ryan running. He didn't cry. He didn't call for James. He turned and sprinted down the hallway, straight to Gloria's room. James followed slowly, heart tight in his chest. When he reached the doorway, he saw them. Both boys curled into her lap, wrapped in a blanket, one of Gloria's old gospel songs playing low in the background. Her arms held them steady, not too tight, not too loose. James stood in the hall and didn't speak. He just watched. It wasn't the moment itself that broke him. It was what it meant. They felt safe, and he hadn't seen that look in their eyes in over 2 years. Now, in the stillness of the study, James took the pen and signed the form. His hand hesitated for only a second. He wasn't giving away responsibility. He was sharing it with the one person who had been faithful without needing recognition. He slid the papers into the envelope, sealed it, and placed the brass key on top. Then he stood and exhaled. It felt like something had cracked open inside his chest, something buried under years of grief and pride. He found her in the kitchen, humming as she wiped down the counter. The boys were upstairs, already drifting off, storm forgotten. James didn't say anything at first. He placed the envelope on the table, then the key. Gloria turned, confused. Her hands still held the cloth. "What's this?" she asked, quiet. James looked at her with the kind of expression that doesn't come easy to a man who's carried too much alone. "It's not charity," he said. "It's clarity." She didn't open the envelope yet. She just looked at him, eyes searching. James took a slow breath. If anything ever happens, they need someone they run to. Someone they trust. Someone who's already family. Gloria's lips parted slightly, but no words came. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She reached down and picked up the key, holding it like it was sacred. "I never asked for this," she whispered. "I know," James replied. "But maybe you were always meant for it." She nodded once, pressed the envelope to her chest. The moment held, neither of them moved. Because something holy had happened. Not loud, not grand, just honest. That night, the house was quiet again. But this silence was peace. The fridge still held the wrinkled photo. The slime bucket waited under the sink. And upstairs, 2 little boys slept soundly. Not because life had gone back to what it was, but because, for the first time in years, it had become something new. The grass was still damp from last night's rain. James sat on the park bench, hands resting on his knees, eyes following 2 little boys as they raced ahead, shoes untied, giggles loud, arms outstretched like airplanes. He watched them with a stillness he hadn't known before. Not the kind of still that comes from shutting down. The kind that comes from finally opening up. Gloria sat in the grass beneath a tree, knees drawn up, smile soft. A sandwich wrapper sat in her lap, untouched. She was too busy watching the boys. Evan had climbed halfway up a low tree. Ryan jumped at the base, trying to hand him a stick. And then the voice came. "Gloria, look. Mama Gloria, watch me." It was Ryan who said it. The words slipped out like they'd always belonged. No one corrected him. No one froze. No one even blinked. Except James. He sat a little straighter, his breath catching just slightly. Not because he was surprised, but because the name finally sounded right. He looked over at Gloria. She hadn't moved, just looked back at him, unsure, waiting. James smiled. A real one. If it's born from love, he said gently, I have no issue with the name. Something passed between them in that moment, something quiet and sacred. She nodded once. And James felt peace settle into his bones. That evening, the fridge door was still covered in fingerprints. The original photo remained wrinkled, crooked, holy. Next to it now, taped with 2 pieces of blue painter's tape, was a new photo. Gloria on the floor, arms around both boys. Ryan's head rested on her shoulder. Evan held a drawing they made together. In the corner, barely visible, was James, sitting on the rug beside them. Not centered, not framed, but present. Before bedtime, the boys asked for one more story. James offered. Gloria pulled the blanket over their legs, and he sat at the edge of the bed, book in hand, reading slowly, a little awkwardly, but fully there. Evan interrupted twice to correct a word. Ryan asked if dinosaurs knew about pancakes. James answered every question, didn't rush. He stayed until they were asleep. Not because it was scheduled, because it mattered. As he walked out of the room, Gloria followed quietly. They didn't speak in the hallway. There was nothing left to explain. At the top of the stairs, James paused. I used to think control would protect them, he said. I thought if I kept everything in place, they'd stay safe. Gloria looked at him gently. You were grieving. He nodded. Still am. She smiled softly. Grief doesn't mean you stopped loving. It just means the love doesn't know where to go. James let those words sit with him. Then, almost to himself, now I think it knows. Downstairs, the lights dimmed. The house was quiet again, but not empty. The quiet now was filled with something new. Presence. At the kitchen table, James reached into his pocket and placed the brass key on the wood. Gloria glanced at it. You didn't give that back, he said with a small smile. She met his eyes. I didn't think I was supposed to. He chuckled under his breath. You weren't. And then, for the first time since Elise died, he reached across the table, took her hand, and held it. Not with pressure, not with confusion, just gratitude. Not for what she'd done, but for who she'd been. Upstairs, a small voice stirred in the dark. Daddy? Evan whispered. James looked up the stairs. Yeah, buddy? A pause. Then, you're not leaving again, right? James's throat tightened. He stepped up 2 stairs and called back. No, he said. I'm right here. And finally, he was. Not every miracle comes with thunder. Sometimes, it comes with green slime, a folded blanket, and someone who chooses to stay when they didn't have to. Healing doesn't always come through plans or titles. Sometimes it comes through presence, through listening, through love that shows up quietly, again and again. And maybe that's what God does too. He sends the right people, into the right places, at just the right time, not to fix everything, but to remind us he never left.